Thank you for calling Kensington Wine Market. Please listen carefully to the following options as they have recently changed and there will be a test at the end. For general inquiries or to speak to a salesperson, press 1. For questions about your web orders or delivery, press 2. For corporate orders and gifting, press 3. To hear our current store hours, press 4. Do not, I repeat, do not press 5. There is no 5. If human interaction scares you and you would prefer to leave a voicemail, press 6. On the flip side, if you are infuriated by automated phone menus and just want to speak to an actual human being, press 0. If you have fallen in love with the sound of my voice and want to hear me repeat this menu again, star.
Oh, you should have said push 5. That would have been awesome. Well,
I can't remember if pushing 5 actually does anything. I used to have a WAV file on there that it just said, "Oh, great, you push 5," and then it went to this weird modem connecting sound and everything, and then hung up on you. But I decided that might have been too harsh to customers. So,
so for people that have ever called Kensington Wine Market before, you have inevitably heard that menu system. And if you didn't know, this was Evan Eckersley's voice that you heard. And on tonight on Unpoured Perspectives, we'd like to welcome Evan to find out a little more about him and his past and how he got into this business, and also to talk about, sort of a state of Canadian whiskey. Welcome, Evan.
Thanks for having me.
To start off, do you wanna just tell us sort of how you got into, how did you get to where you're at? Like, what was your career path?
Sorry, just one sec. I've got my boys coming in the side of the room here. I happen to be where the printer paper for making paper airplanes is, so it's very crucial. Oh, it's not a paper airplane this time.
Yeah. Parent activity.
Okay, so
you're busy. I'm going to skip school tomorrow.
Well, that one skipped school today because he's been home with a stomach bug. So I skipped work because of that too. So yeah, my name's Evan Eckersley. I work at a fairly well-known whiskey retail store that doesn't have whiskey in the name. Instead, we call it Kensington Wine Market. That's been in Calgary since 1993. I've been there for just short of a decade now. I think I hit the decade mark in October. I started in October of 2015 at Kensington Wine Market. Before that, I worked at another fairly prominent whiskey store called Willow Park Wines and Spirits here in Calgary. I've been in Calgary, Alberta for about half my life now, and was born and raised in a small town called Creston, BC. And I've been in love with whiskey for about half my life now. I kind of got bit by the bug back in 2002 when I was working at a restaurant. Manager at the time while we were doing the cash out and close out, poured me a dram of Oban 14, and I just got immediately hooked. There was just something about it that made me want to find out more about what it was, how it was made, what else there was out there. And it just, I dove right down a rabbit hole, and I've never really surfaced since then, I guess. I feel I'm very fortunate to actually work in, I guess, a career that's a hobby as well. It's been great because I honestly couldn't afford to purchase half the stuff I've managed to, or been fortunate enough to taste over the years. And it's given me some really fun opportunities to do some writing along the way, and both for Kensington Wine Market with our whiskey calendar and blog posts, and do stuff like this too, and really connect with other enthusiasts, which is such a big part of what makes this so much fun for me.
Nice. Welcome. So your current title at Kensington Wine Market is store manager, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, store manager, whiskey enthusiast, and honestly, with our store, we're one store and we're a small group of people. There's about 15 of us total, front and back end. So in a lot of cases, titles are pretty meaningless beyond Andrew Ferguson being owner and the main Scotch guy. that sort of built the business into what it is now. We all do a little bit of everything. My focus is definitely on the whiskey side, and that's why I was hired. But I do a lot of stuff on the wine side with editing the wine line newsletters that we put out and such as well, and doing a lot of stuff on the web and changing the answering machine when nobody's looking.
Oh, and creating tricky third questions and setting up questions for tastings.
Yes, yeah, that's probably the thing that keeps me in the money the most, I think.
That's the reason you remain employed.
That's right. Yeah, it's just those third questions.
So for those people that haven't done a tasting with Kensington Wine Market, there's normally a couple of questions at the end. What was your main favorite? What was your second favorite? And if Evan was in the mood, then you normally get a cheeky third question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been one of the big fun things about writing and sort of being able to be creative about things as well. With us being a small shop and just a small sort of pirate ship of staff, we're really allowed to sort of exhibit our own personalities. We're not fitting into a corporate culture or this cookie cutter style of sales or anything like that. And it's allowed me to use what I like to term my sense of humor, but not everybody agrees with that sense of humor all the time, or whether it is funny or not. But luckily enough, people put up with it that I can still do that. So it's really allowed me to inform my writing and do little things like that as well.
So where does that creativity and the writing bug come from? Is that something from a partial past career, or is it something that you've just enjoyed throughout your life?
It's kind of genetic. My father, he was for until his retirement, he worked most of his career at a newspaper in Creston, BC. The only newspaper in Creston was and is the Creston Valley Advance. That was my first job, was being delivering papers when I hit grade 2, all the way up till about grade 11. But he was a columnist, and he'd have a column on just like whatever he wanted to write about weekly, and then eventually started doing a wine column too, talking about his wine experiences tasting in the Okanagan and in other parts of the world, and just from a more, not like a necessarily full-on educated and like I've done the WSET and I know how to taste things, but just from a like experiential point of view of connecting with people and trying new wines and being impressed with them and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I got it from, I think, is directly from him.
Beautiful. So what are your thoughts on sort of the transformation that AI has played into writing copy and writing articles and things like that?
I don't know. It's so hard to. We're so much in the thick of it right now that it's really hard to decide how much it's going to play a role in the future. AI is fun to play with, and I'm very guilty of playing with it when it comes to like making pictures for our tastings and stuff like that. Writing wise, I think of using it every now and then I figure, well, it's probably going to be more difficult than I think it is to set up something that in the way I want it, and I'd rather pick the words myself. But I can see how it can definitely be beneficial for a lot of people if you're in sort of more of a copywriting role or something like that. I think the biggest difficulty that we're going to fumble with for a long time as a society is deciding where the difference or where the line is for what's actual human creativity and what's AI driven, and also whether that matters or not. It's such a philosophical debate that when you get down to it, more than anything else, that yeah, I just don't know what to make of it. That was my first joke in when I started writing for the Whiskey Explorer magazine, was I can't wait to be taken over, or this job to be taken over by AI. So it was good for that.
I do use AI a little bit. I mostly use it to start though, right? Is I'll ask for, give me X, Y, and Z, or write a couple of paragraphs on this. And so I find that once I have something, then I'll go through and rewrite the whole thing. but to start from a blank page, I find very difficult. And being a software developer, I tend to take this iterative approach anyways. So I rewrite paragraphs naturally. I do think it's useful, and I find it useful, and I find that it helps me a lot.
Yeah, I can see how that would definitely help in that perspective. I have a bit of that with my own sense of humor, where I find I can't be funny in a vacuum. Like I can't just create from emptiness something. I usually am bantering back and forth with somebody or riffing off of what someone else said to try and put a funny spin on it. Trying to just be funny just on my own is incredibly difficult. So maybe I just need an AI buddy beside me to set me up sometimes.
That's a great question. If you had an AI setup guy, what would he look like?
Yeah. I don't know. My biggest worry is he'd end up being funnier than I am, which I mean, it wouldn't be that difficult, honestly. So
I would name mine Stephen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, very classic funny guy.
I would expect, Evan, that coming from bartending, you were talking about earlier about connecting, that earlier in your career, the bartending side, catering side, probably, you probably bring a lot of that into a lot of that experience into your current job as store manager.
A little bit. I think, although my head tends to be in a computer a lot, in behind the scenes, I'm definitely guilty of not being on the floor up front as much as I should be in a lot of cases. But when I am on the floor, it tends to give me a decent perspective or overview of exactly what's happening in front. I found that as a bartender, I ended up more in a role where I was more the guy that was making sure that the trains ran on time as much as anything else, as just slinging drinks right out front, especially after a few years in. But I still have difficulty thinking of myself as a bartender, even though I did it for a decade plus, because I got so big into my interest in whiskey and stuff that I completely, partially because of the era when I did it, but I completely missed the cocktail craze and the sort of the cocktail scene revival that's been happening for the last 15 years or so. I probably could have been a part of it, but my head was in books at that point and reading about whiskey and single malts and so on. And the only reason I got into bartending in the first place was to kind of push myself out of my own shell. At 22, I had struggled for a long time, always feeling like very much, and still am to this day, an introvert, where I'm more comfortable just being on my own and not interacting socially in a lot of cases. But that sort of allowed me to develop that side of things, and has definitely informed me customer service wise to a great deal.
Me too, actually. Going to as an independent baller, going to these events like Whiskey Wonderland and Spirit of Toronto, which is coming up, and having 600 people in front of me and having to interact with them all is just, after Whiskey Wonderland, I was like done. I was so just mentally drained.
Yeah.
So I totally I understand.
Yeah, you want to crawl somewhere and put on headphones and then just like avoid the world for a bit. I haven't been out to Whiskey Wonderland or anything. I'd love to go. I've done the Victoria Whiskey Festival 5 or 6 times, and it's a fantastic festival out on the West Coast there. And the staff that get to go out for Kensington Wine Market, we're essentially there as unofficial ambassadors for the store as much as anything else, as much as we are as whiskey enthusiasts as well. So a lot of what we're doing is just chatting with a lot of customers and friends that we've made over the years in the whiskey community. Being able to do that on company time is a lot of fun, but it is in a weird way draining, like where I find myself at after parties and stuff wanting to be the first guy that checks out and just go watch something on Netflix or go read a comic or something afterwards in
Yeah,
my hotel room.
yeah. So, moving on from introverts,
Mhm,
um, let's get into a little bit more of your writing. So, you've
mhm.
written for the Whiskey Explorer, you write for the Kensington Wine Market blog. You've put, I think, some stuff on LinkedIn. Like,
Yeah.
what else have you done, and do you have anything coming up?
So that's been a brunt of it. There's always bits and pieces here and there on Kensington Wine Market's whiskey newsletter, the Malt Messenger, where like if it has to do with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, likely it's me writing it. If it has to do with Canadian whiskey and before this bourbon whiskey, it was typically myself writing it. I just enjoy the writing side, so it kind of defaults to me. If it's something that Andrew doesn't have the same interest in, or doesn't have the time for, which is the case a lot of the times. And we have other people that are fantastic writers in their own right, or fantastic salespeople in their own right. Harmony is our best salesperson, in my opinion. A few of you have likely interacted with Harmony. She's fantastic, and she's fantastic to do virtual tastings with as well. Kurt Robinson. I don't know if you guys know him as well, but he's kind of like the progenitor to what we're doing right now, where he had a whiskey blog called All Things Whiskey that was around in 2005 and 2006. Did a lot of scores and stuff on that site and wrote up his opinions and thoughts on things. So we have this sort of pedigree of whiskey geeks at Kensington Wine Market where yeah, they're fun to banter with and do virtual tastings with, and they tend to be fun for consumers to come to as well that are just getting into things.
Yeah, I think the whiskey geekery side of things is
Hmm.
very cool on a Kensington Wine Market for you guys to talk about because you guys know a lot about the different distilleries, right?
Yeah.
Like Andrew has been all over to every
Hmm.
distillery. I mean, I'm sure you have gone on trips with him. Kurt's been, and you guys have been to like the Ardbegs and all the different distilleries, and you've done the tours, and you have
Hmm.
all the information. I feel like you guys could write your own books about, all the different distilleries and trips, and there's always some pictures about different trips that come up, which is cool. Now, you also organize the Scotch Malt Whisky Society stuff.
Yeah.
So tell us about interacting with that specifically.
Yeah. So Kensington Wine Market, we're the first store in Canada to have sold Scotch Malt Whisky Society bottles. We were the sort of the launching point for the SMWS Canada, what, 14, nearly 15 years ago, I think now. Was it 2013? So I guess 12 years this year. So, but that was before I was even working at Kensington Wine Market. I was a bartender at the time, and I was at the launch party for it as a consumer. Got my membership that first day. My membership number ended up being 42, which was awesome because that's Tobermory / Lecheg for that
And
society number, which was
and
pretty
the answer
kismet.
to life and everything.
It
Life.
is just
Yeah.
like that distillery. Yeah. But uh, it's, I was lucky enough when I came to Kensington Wine Market that Andrew was trying to take a step back from a lot of the tasting roles that he had. And the SMWS tastings was one of the first things he tried to let go of because he needed time to actually focus on the ownership side of the business too. So I ended up being the one of the next guys to take it over after Hunter, I think, did a few of them Hunter who worked with us at the time. But then that sort of ended up being my baby for a good while.
Yeah.
And still is to an extent, but it's a baby that Harmony now and I now have joint ownership of. So we both get to
For
play in that
for
sandbox.
for those of you that have been on a recent tasting, I think we just
Mhm.
crossed off a bingo card, a
Yeah.
bingo
Yeah.
square.
Yeah. Another one of my this is what I'm doing at work when I should be actually doing work projects.
We'll just leave that there.
Mhm.
So I think I mean, do you guys have any other questions? Like
Just sort of like another point going back to the writing there. You mentioned something briefly about reading a comic.
Yeah.
What comics are you interested in?
So I used to be a bit of a collector in the let's see, teenage years. So for me, mid to late 90s, mostly on the indie side of things. Funny because I'm usually an indie guy when it comes to whiskey as well with independent bottlers. But with like starting when Image Comics first came around, I think I have a ratty copy of Spawn #1 somewhere, still hiding away somewhere. But ended up getting more into just the reading side of it, not the collecting. So I ended up getting into trade paperbacks and stuff like that. Sin City was one that I really enjoyed. Bone, when it was first coming out, was fantastic. As an adult, I got more into stuff like Usagi Yojimbo from Dark Horse Comics, and did read through Cerebus at one point. I think I still have those phone books somewhere, but mostly indie comic stuff. Now most of what I read is on my phone, and it's a lot of fan translations of manga and manhwa and stuff like that. It's just stuff where I can not be thinking about whiskey or family for a few minutes here and there.
Yeah, I briefly dabbled in reading some and collecting a little bit. I think one of my favorite was it was called Planetary.
Yeah, that was a fantastic series.
Yeah, I love that series, really good. And recently I went and I found the omnibus of it and picked that up.
Nice.
I lent it to my brother and I never saw it again, so I'm not sure where it went.
Yeah, it's usually a good sign it was loved. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Or
that
he's
was
too scared to give it back because he never read it.
that's right. That's the other side of it. But yeah, I tend to like reading wise, a lot of what I read for fun tends to be science fiction and fantasy and some superhero stuff just for kicks as well. So
Very good. And I bet your kids have adopted that in some way, shape, or form too.
yeah, I'm honestly kind of jealous. Like my parents were always really good at letting me read whatever I wanted, but reading comics is definitely not the taboo that it used to be. There's so many like comic books and graphic novels that are geared towards any age group now. It's just fantastic.
And how old are your little ones?
So I have a 6-year-old that's not quite reading yet, named Cormac, and then I have he's my youngest. He was the one that was homesick today, and then Griffin, who's 9 years old, and then Isla, who is turning 11.
Nice. I've got Madeline, who is 11. Her middle name
Cool.
is from a Planet Hulk comic book.
Cool.
And Evie, who is 8, and her name is from V for Vendetta.
Oh, very cool.
Not
I'm not a comic book person, which is where the hold on to the comic and I don't want to give it back because I never read it. I have one of those right now where I'm scared if I give it back, I have to have this conversation where I'm like,
Yeah.
I kept it for this
So what'd
long
you think
and I
about
never
it?
read it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to have that conversation. But
Yeah.
but V for Vendetta is one of my favorite movies of all time.
okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Love that story.
Graphic novel is very good too. So
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's good, Alan Moore.
I don't have any comic books. I don't have any kids.
Man, you are saving so much money.
yeah.
It's crazy.
Am I?
Yeah, you see?
This is only part of it. So
Mhm.
I bought. Although Lego, I have a nephew who's just turned 7, and Lego's pretty expensive. So
That's
Yeah.
true. That's true. A Lego set can cost as much as a whiskey bottle easily.
well, especially all those Mario ones. And now Pokemon's
Oh.
coming out soon. So
Yeah, my youngest has taken more to Lego than my elder two. Luckily, we have a big bin of Lego from when I was a kid that my brother and I had, and he's inherited it now. But he'll get some of those. He's 6, and he'll get some of those 7 to 9-year-old models, and just he's like Rain Man. Literally, he'll just sit and do it until it's done.
that's
Nice.
better than
Yeah.
the other alternatives. So
Yeah, it keeps them away from screen time for a little bit, so it's probably a win or a
Yeah.
net positive. So
Nice. Shall we move on to state of Canadian whiskey?
yeah.
So, well, let's just ask straight out. What is your opinion? What are your viewpoints on Canadian whiskey? We know you recently wrote an article for the Kensington Wine Market blog
Mhm.
about, sort of a state of Canadian whiskey. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so in general, my thoughts have really changed on it over the last, well, 3 months, give or take, depending on which tweet started everything, I guess you could go by. But it's I had in mind doing a piece for the Whiskey Explorer magazine called "The State of Canadian Whiskey" for a while, and to talk to the editor, Joanne McInnes, a fantastic lady, a fantastic
Yeah,
editor as
she's
well,
awesome.
about doing it, and it kept on getting me like, no, put it off, and let's wait for this issue. We want to focus on sort of this theme for now, and so on and so forth, which was totally fine and probably good because Joanne would probably say I'm way too verbose, and usually it's, can you give me 1,000 words maximum, and then I hand in a 1,500 word paper that she has to hack away at. But it's originally I wanted to do the piece on just my general frustration with Canadian whiskey, and how it's perceived by consumers, and uh, the difficulty that these monolithic sort of like Canadian whiskey companies make things be, where like the Crown Royals and the Wisers of the world, where we've kind of pigeonholed Canadian whiskey into this perception of just being bland and boring and like Barwell slew in a lot of cases, and my frustration with that, and that frustration actually came a bit out of going to Kentucky in 2017, and going to being in Louisville and seeing like the Jim Beam whiskey experience and the Evan Williams whiskey experience, and this is before Michter's and Brown-Forman had theirs with the Old Forester one. I haven't even been to those ones yet, but and just seeing that, and then coming back to Calgary and being like, why the hell does Alberta Distillers not have a micro distillery on 17th Avenue showing what they do? And just being so frustrated with the fact that Alberta Distillers specifically, but the rest of Canadian whiskey as well, has like zero interest in tooting their own horn and showing what they're capable of. Uh, Little things like the best Crown Royal gets sent to Texas as single barrels, and we can't get a single barrel for the life of us up here in Canada. It still infuriates me. Alberta Distillers seems to be doing a bit more than they used to, which is great. I think the Cask Strength series kind of put them on a map for a lot of people, but I can still see Calgarians and say, the best rye distillery is in our backyard here, and they're shocked. They have no idea what I'm talking about. So there's still work to do on that. But now, with the sort of the abundance of craft distilleries that have come out, I see a sort of like a brighter way forward. And along with without getting political, the tariff issue that Canada is facing right now, and the big pushback towards things, and people searching for Canadian alternatives to whiskeys they would have purchased before. I see that as sort of like a great spin and a great sort of path forward for a lot of young distilleries that are going to be looking for a way to survive, and get to the point where they have older whiskey to sell instead of just selling gin and their youngest stuff as soon as it hits 3 years old. So overall, I'm pretty positive. I think there's more opportunity now the way things are, and I've been really enjoying seeing these small distilleries crop up that I had no idea. Like all of a sudden there's a new bottle, or someone's contacted us to ask if we'll put their stuff on the shelves, and I've never heard of them before. I just found out there's a distillery about now, probably about 2.5 hours from Calgary, that sounds like it's on some guy's farmland, where he has 3 different styles of whiskey: a rye, a single malt, and a triticale whiskey, all bottled at 46% alcohol.
Nice.
All legitimate whiskeys, and I've never even heard of them before. So there's little things like that really give me hope, and for the future, it's going to be interesting to see how many of those craft distilleries can stick around still. But I hope they all get a say in shaping what Canadian whiskey means to us in the future.
I think I agree with like virtually all of that.
Mhm.
I mean, yes, the large monolithic, Crown Royals and Corby's and Hiram Walkers and, all of those places have dominated, Canadian whiskey, both internally and externally, like to Canada for a long time. I think they do present whiskey a certain way. And I don't know that I'm necessarily a fan of the way that they generally present Canadian whiskey. But I've said this on previous podcasts, but I do think that, we do kind of owe a little bit the fact that we still have, Canadian whiskey, and this is where we're at right now. We do kind of owe it, to them, whether or not they are partly responsible for, whatever actions or, making it difficult for certain things to happen, and for maybe the smaller players to come up in the world. Like all of that aside, I think we do kind of need to just like recognize that and be cool. Like just that's that. Having said that, for me, looking at Canadian whiskey, or at least let's say whiskey in general, right? Like let's start with whiskey in general, because whiskey in general is sort of on the decline. Right. And, there's distilleries closing. You're hearing about very large distilleries closing in Ireland and, Scotland and the States, as well as in Canada. There have been distilleries closing in Canada as well. But I do still look at it in that positive light that you framed as well. There are distilleries that are earning awards. There are Canadian distilleries that are earning awards overseas. There are, even the Canadian Whisky Awards have gone from awarding the large players to, like the last 3 years, a craft distillery has won, best Canadian whiskey. We're constantly hearing about new Canadian distilleries, and I'm talking to more and more in whiskey enthusiasts in Canada who are searching out and seeking these local distilleries, and I think that's kind of a big reason for me for doing this podcast. So I think that I don't know if I can say that whiskey in Canada is expanding, but I think I can say that there are a lot of distilleries that are expanding, that are selling more and more whiskey, that are doing better, that are getting more renown, that are getting access to different markets. And I think that's really positive.
Quick question about that one gentleman. You said he's got his own little farmhouse. He's distilling.
Yeah.
How does one get to that point? Because is it not legal for you to have a still in Canada, right? Making any kind of alcohol is illegal until you have a license. And to get a license, you need to jump through a number of hoops. But nobody's going to get a license unless they think they can do it.
Yep.
So are we the chicken before the egg in a lot of cases here?
Kind of. And this is probably leads to the biggest difficulty for Canadian whiskey in general, as it is now, in my opinion, which is distribution. So many of the craft distilleries out there don't get heard of because getting distribution outside of their own home province is sometimes either difficult or impossible, for numerous reasons. One being the interprovincial trade barriers, but also just scale, for a lot of them. Like there's, except for like Rupert's whiskey, which was sort of produced to be a little bit more mass marketable. A lot of what Eau Claire distillery produces is going to be in 1 in 2,000 bottle runs, if that. So you won't see a lot of their single malts or their other batches out there. For distilleries that are on the smaller scale, getting their stuff out there is really difficult. And then there's beyond that, you have to sort of like intentionally go out to get your commercial distiller's license and run through the hoops before you even put stuff in barrel, to wait 3 more years before you can even release anything when it comes to whiskey. It's this weird thing economically where you're kind of always reacting to a market that might or might not be there when you finally have the whiskey to sell.
Yeah, it seems like it's a slippery slope, an uphill climb, all of those cliches. Do you think there are any entities that are actively working against smaller distilleries, or is it just the way the system is set up? Unless you're sort of mass producing, you're not going to make money.
So I don't think there's like this. I don't really think there's any big entities beyond maybe liquor boards in different provinces that get in the way or hobble that I'm aware of. There's probably some taxation issues here and there that I don't know about, I'm sure. But I don't think it is a case of the sort of like the big three or whatever you want to call it when it comes to Canadian whiskey, sort of keeping the other guys down. I think that's just a question of volume that it comes down to more than anything else.
I think that I think I would agree, but I also don't think they are doing what they could or should
Yeah,
for
I
Canadian
agree with
whiskey
that.
either,
Yeah.
right? Like they can afford a lot of the fees and things that are, you know, outrageous, excuse me, and ridiculous. And if it takes, 6 months, like it's personally, we've been trying to get like our agent into Alberta for 8 months, I think almost
Mhm.
9 months now. We still are not registered, sorry, not Alberta, into BC. We
Yeah.
we did just get registered in Alberta, and that took 8 months.
Right
And
on.
then,
Glad you got
trying to
there.
register a product in Alberta is, 3 to 5 weeks. It's,
Yeah.
and then there's the shipping and the way that all works. So
Yeah.
things aren't that like there's no prioritization for local product or
Nope.
Canadian product. And I think in BC, it's sort of the opposite, where they highly prioritize BC product,
Yes.
but Canadian product, like I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know if they care. And like again, we're still not in BC, and we've been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And I don't know,
Hmm.
I don't like. There's no avenue for us to be like, like I don't even think we could pay for a quicker registration.
No, you'd almost have to probably, and I've never dealt with the BC Liquor Board, so I don't know for certain, but just spitballing, I'm guessing you'd probably have to kind of do what you guys seem to have done with Last Straw, where you have a Canadian distillery act as your bottler, have it bottled in BC and it be BC whiskey for your release, and then go that route.
Yeah, maybe that's a that's definitely an avenue for sure. But that definitely should not be the case though.
No, no, it shouldn't.
Like,
And it's like without getting into the quagmire that is shipping with whiskey enthusiasts that we all know everybody does, but nobody wants to say exactly how we do it, especially me as a retailer. But everybody does it because you can't get the stuff that you can get often in Alberta in other provinces. Um, when you're talking about Scotch and American whiskey and even some Canadian whiskey releases for that matter. But it is this weird, like we are still sort of parceled up, even though we're one big giant country here, where we have these borders that really affect what you have access to as a whiskey consumer.
yeah.
That
Can
that
we
just shouldn't be there.
can we just define, like, are we able to define that for a second? To be like, what is the actual, like, supposedly it's illegal to ship
Yeah.
whiskey from Alberta into Ontario,
No,
or
Hmm.
but
it's
okay, so
technically
what is
there's
the
there's
actual?
there's a couple sets of different rules. It's not technically
Yep.
it's not illegal, but there's avenues of depending on who you're using and what mode of transportation is being used
Yep.
that makes
Yep.
it legal.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Technically, like
people.
Canada
y-
Post technically is not supposed to ship alcohol.
Yeah.
Uh,
But Canada Post can ship alcohol from valid licensees,
and
Mhm.
that's where the
right? If you have an account
that's
with them and you've gone through the registration and you are, approved to ship alcohol with Canada Post, you can ship alcohol.
yeah, but I don't think like anybody in Alberta is.
No, like we can ship via Canada Post within our own province, but it can't be to BC or Saskatchewan or any other provinces beyond that. That's for sure.
But why
Um,
is that? Like, is that because
so
of the
it
LCBO?
it's generally my understanding, and again, you guys probably have a better understanding in some cases than I do on this. because of the provinces you live in. But it's usually the LCBO and the BC LDB that are going to be the big guys that are against it. And it's, for better or worse, it's protectionist. They're protecting their own profits and ability to make them by keeping competition out. Alberta is just a different monster when it comes to provincial liquor boards because it's been privatized since 1992. Kensington Wine Market, when it opened up, it was one of the first private wine stores out there. And now, like, you can't throw a rock in any direction from Kensington Wine Market without hitting another privatized liquor store. That's just what Alberta is. It's the reason that we have access to all these bottles that everybody else wants is because although it's been difficult for you guys, Kevin, like it is far, far easier to get anything listed in Alberta than it is in just about any other province out there. And that's why we have the access to the stuff that we do.
Yeah. But so let's talk about another problem that is caused, from my understanding, by the LCBO, right? Because there were recently a bunch of like pretty good whiskey that had been on the shelf or been in the warehouse for a very long time, and the Alberta warehouse, the HLC, charges escalating fees for the longer that it sits.
Yep.
And so that whiskey was going to be destroyed, but eventually, got sold to certain stores. Certain stores took it at a significantly decreased cost. But maybe you can explain why that is.
So that rule is new though, right? That's what, like 6-7 months ago, the extra fees?
Yeah, Alberta is relatively new to the charging for warehouse game, or warehousing, or at least to the extent that other places do. BC's been doing it for longer, I think, although their fees are now potentially less than Alberta's are. But because of the different liquor boards and different charges for things, there's always been this shell game for a lot of the national distributors of the bigger brands of, well, we'll bring it into X and then we'll distribute it from there. Or it hasn't sold in this province, so let's move it to this province, and then we'll just drop the price via a limited time offer or a full-on price drop to just shovel it out into the market. Because the difficulty with BC on Ontario for a lot of these distributors is if Ontario doesn't pull the product after they've asked for it, you're still on the hook for paying for it. Like Ontario and BC don't pay for anything until it's essentially in the liquor store sold, in some cases, as far as I understand it. Whereas you can bring it into Alberta and all of a sudden you have 40 different liquor stores that potentially could purchase it. It's just a bigger pool of competition here versus not having any competition in these other provinces.
Do you guys have your own warehouse?
We do have our own warehouse. It's tiny.
But those fees don't apply if you have it in yourself, right?
Yes, but it means that we have to purchase it and then sit on it ourselves, which in some cases we do, but not always. Yeah.
But do you know if there's any truth to this theory, or maybe it's a rumor, I don't know, that the LCBO by contract enforces that big companies like Diageo or distilleries from Scotland sell them their product at the lowest possible rate in Canada? So what that means is that if Diageo is going to sell Lagavulin whatever at $150 to the LCBO, sorry?
Then it's going to be 300 at the LCBO.
But yeah, I mean, I'm just using 150 as a number, but $150 as the cost. That means that Diageo is not allowed by contract to sell it into Alberta at a lower cost than $150. Do you know if there's any truth to that?
So I've never seen a contract to say a yes or no. What I can say is that I've definitely seen products that come into Alberta at egregious pricing that seems to be possibly to balance out somewhere where they're taking a loss in another province, perhaps.
So that was so my theory was that these products, right, were forced at a specific cost in Ontario. That then meant that they couldn't go into Alberta at a lower cost, which meant that they were at an egregious price for Alberta. which then meant they sat.
Yep.
And then, couldn't sell, and then had to be just like basically whatever.
But
dumped on the
the other
market.
side
Yeah.
of the other side of that is that I know there's reps that have worked at LCBO, and they're like, we're gonna say we're gonna do. Well, they said it's 150. The LCBO is like, no, we're gonna do 280. It sits for a year. Then they do, certain random stores can do up to a 30% discount. So then the bottle goes back to like 160, 170. And it sits a little longer, and then there's like a store wide all across the province thing where it eventually gets to the price where it should have been in the first place. And
Yep.
then, a year later, a year and a half or 2 years later, that product then disappears from the shelf because LCBO is like, well, it didn't move. That's because they're forcing products in and then forcing products out because of their ridiculous. And
Yep.
they have all the people that work at the LCBO have zero clue of what they're doing, have zero clue of actually no. And I've done this. I've gone to the LCBO and asked them and offered to like my own plan, and they're like, you have no idea what you're talking about. They just like to throw in their face that, hey, we make $16 billion a quarter. You have no idea what you're talking about. But like it's a shame
Yeah.
that it messes the rest of Canada up because the rest of us don't get the experience. I mean, the three of us are in Ontario, so we know exactly.
Yeah, so because we're Ontario, this is sort of turned into a bit of an LCBO bitch session, which is not
Yep.
the intent.
No, but I mean, it's interesting to see how things work behind the scenes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. The main point here being that it's possible but unconfirmed that
Yeah.
the LCBO is causing issues even in other provinces.
Yeah. Well, and it's like from my perspective, working with a retailer, I see it as at the other end of things, and maybe it is ultimately the LCBO making this happen, but we've definitely seen it in Alberta where its companies have chosen to have a higher price wholesale wise versus other provinces because this is where they feel they can make that money back. I don't think that maybe works as well in the economy we have right now where whiskey is down a bit. But the one upside of that, where we are whiskey wise, I wanted to say is if you're a savvy consumer, like you're going to be able to find some bargains in the next 2 or 3 years. Or as you were saying, you'll find stuff where it's actually priced where it should have been in the first place.
Yeah. So in
Well,
summary, go ahead.
Another thing is too is like we know I've heard from especially since what happened at Whiskey Wonderland, and then I mean Andrew was supposed to have a table, and there
Yeah.
were rumors of LCBO snooping around, and then I've been told recently that LCBO is possibly contacting Canada Post to find out who's shipping what to where, and that they're going after said people, and that they're affecting. It's gonna be a big backlash against other provinces across Canada, and there's all this like mayhem happening. So yeah, the LCBO is sticking their nose where they shouldn't, and it's causing a lot of issues for a lot of different people. So, and also that they're declining to even take Canadian products on their shelf and just turning down like actual Canadian distilleries that they're going on and saying, "Hey, buy Canadian," but yet they're refusing Canadian brands.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that to me, like pricing is probably the biggest frustration. The other big frustration in all of this is that you have like 2 or 3 people that sit on a board in Ontario or BC or wherever that are the ultimate tastemakers. They get to decide what everybody else in the province is drinking. That's one of the things that I truly enjoy about Alberta is that my opinion matters as much as somebody that works for the ALDB or what the heck is it? I just think of it as Connect right now. But AGLC, thank you. But like, and your opinion matters as much as what they say too. Like, as long as a liquor store is willing to bring it in and put it on the shelf, someone's probably willing to bring it into the province and distribute it.
The LCBO, they're more worried about what if it's going to match their cotton candy or their popcorn they're eating. Like my dad worked for the liquor store, like the liquor store when I was a little kid, And my dad knew every SKU in the store. He knew where every product was made. He knew how it was made. He knew where it was in the store. He knew everything about every single product. You go into I literally walk into a liquor store now just to be a jerk and ask questions, and like they don't even know where the bourbon section is. Like I could pick up a bottle of vodka and be like, "Hey, is this bourbon really good?" And they'll be like, "Oh yeah, it's amazing." Like they have nobody knows anything anymore. It's awesome to go in and just mess around with people.
Feels
I
like
have heard
we
Grey
have
Goose
the
makes
home-
a fantastic bourbon, by the way.
Yeah. Like it's just shocking the state of where it's was to where it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of liquor store employees that are in our group that are helping and posting stuff, and they're learning just as much as we are as we go, and they're trying to help. And hey, we're getting this new product and this new product, and it's like, okay, sure, like yeah, it's good effort, but I mean, especially in like, I don't know if you guys sell a lot of tequila, but it's like a fast-paced, moving product that's coming up, and like we're just shafted here in Ontario. It's terrible. And I know all the reps in Alberta, and they're amazing.
Joel, you were gonna jump in there on something.
Oh, no. I was just joking around there. But actually, sort of as an aside, Evan, in no particular order, what would you say are the top 5 must-try Canadian whiskeys?
Oh, that's a really good question. So my top for anybody that hasn't tried it would be any version of the Alberta Premium Cask Strength. I think I'd put that at the top of the list. To me, like we are still as consumers, we think of a rye and Canadian whiskey as being synonymous or the same thing, which it is definitely not.
Yeah, don't go there.
They can be both, or they can be one of those things, and that's fine. But I think that shows what rye can do, and it shows it at the volume turned up to 11, which is just, I love full flavor and I love cask strength, and the fact that they did that sort of unadorned with those releases still impresses me.
Nice.
That was fantastic. Beyond that, that's a toughie. There's been a couple Canadian Club releases that I've been impressed with lately. The 15 and the 18, I think are both really good. A little bit more sherry driven, and quite possibly might be Alberta Distillers juice in there again, not stuff from Hiram Walker, surprisingly, as they seem to slowly transition to being an Alberta company, not an Ontario company. But their 15 is bottled at 40% or 42%, and then the 18-year-old is bottled at 58% alcohol. Just a great, nicely sherried Canadian whiskey. I honestly have almost a blind spot when it comes to Hiram Walker. But you can't go wrong with Lot 40 again if you're looking for a good rye. That's at a good price, so I'll pick that one. And then I should probably pick something a little bit smaller. Let's go with Shelter Point. No, let's go with Two Brewers. Just because they're sort of one of the forerunners when it comes to single malt whiskey in Canada. I mean, there is that distillery on the East Coast that's been doing it longer than anybody else in North America. But their stuff just hasn't impressed me as much.
And nobody talks about them anymore.
Yeah, which is too bad. There's so much to talk about with them, but I think maybe it's stylistically, the product just isn't meant for whiskey geeks, perhaps. But Two Brewers, you get these small 1 in 2,000 bottle releases maximum, and then they're on to the next thing. And each one is great. They're almost at release 50, and they've just been killing it every single time.
They have. I love Two Brewers.
So I guess if I needed a fifth one, then Shelter Point, I'd put in there for single malt as well.
Yeah, it's cool. I don't know about the rest of you guys. For me, the best rye in Canada, the Sons of Vancouver. I don't even think it's close. I've never liked Alberta Premium. I think there's just a unique note to it that I just don't like. I don't mind.
That's fair.
Oddly, I don't mind the 23-year. It's a little green. It's got a little bit of a green thing, which is borderlining what I don't like. the cast strength, the batch one was okay, and the rest just I wasn't a fan of. It's funny you mentioned the Canadian Club 18 year, because that one I can't do it. And I had someone tell me that if I was on their podcast and they gave it to me, that I would love it if I didn't know what it was. And I'm like, you're wrong, and I would know exactly what it is. So like,
So maybe I'm right about it being mostly Alberta distillers juice then.
yeah,
It's
maybe.
the cowboy hats and the
Yeah, I
Stetsons
mean,
and the
and I
cowboy
think
boots that you can't stand.
no, and it's I don't know, I don't know what it is. That as far, and then like lot 40, yeah, like the 12-year and the 11-year-old I love, and then it's like they just gave up. But I
So-
mean, being bought by a bigger company can
Yeah.
bring a lot of things too.
I definitely understand where you're coming from. The Alberta Premium, the cask strength series, I agree. They're one of
It's a
one of the
price
best. Well, I think they're one of the
Yeah.
best releases Canada has.
Yep.
But having said that, a lot of the different batches do have a sort of a green vegetal note to them. And sometimes those in the different batches, those have been overwhelming for me. The Sons of Vancouver rye is, I think, more, I mean, maybe it's more fair to sometimes describe it as closer to single malt than a typical sort of like spicy rye, because of the yeast that they use and because of that lactic note that is often present. Sometimes it reminds me of Bruichladdich. So
I think for single malts though, definitely West Coast. Like you said, Two Brewers, Shelter Point, Macaloni's. Like the West Coast has got single malt closed up. Like don't even go anywhere else. It's funny too, even here in Ontario, like yeah, we have lot like Hiram Walker and lot 40. I actually like I like Paradigm, and I can't 100% confidently say it's Wiser's, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I just like that they do a better version of what Wiser's does. Every bottle that they've done to me has tasted better than what Wiser's has come out with for some odd reason.
So all of this super cool. I want to do one more topic and then move on to Canada Corner. We're an hour and 5 minutes here. We're really approaching sort of a hard stop here. So very quickly, I wanted to just run over a pricing, sort of what pricing looks like in Ontario versus what pricing looks like in Alberta, just for our consumers, right? So I have an example here. Let's say generally a cask can cost $3,000, $3,500. Like that's just basic brand new new make in a cask. So that's a full 200-liter cask. Generally will produce around 260 bottles. And then for those of you that are following along, you can do the math along with me. At time of production, that cost is $12 to $15 just for the liquid. Then you've got bottles, labels, licensing fees, other operational fees, right? There's operational fees, which is running your distillery. So let's say, and again, this is unaged liquid, a round number, let's say the cost of the bottle is $30. So now you have a $30 cost per bottle. So in order for a distillery to cover that $30 cost without earning anything else, assuming a 50% ABV, because the LCBO will force you to adjust your prices based on ABV, assuming a 50% ABV, a distillery selling that $30 bottle out of their own store in Ontario, so not in the LCBO, must charge a minimum of $65 in order to just cover that $30 cost. And if they sell in the LCBO, sorry, let me just, so if they want to sell in the LCBO, they will only earn $18 at that same $65 price point. If they have that $30 cost bottle at $65 in the LCBO, they earn $18 back, and that's it.
This
So
is
they
why,
must sell
this
it.
is why Kevin's trying to get into Alberta and BC.
Yes, but so they must sell at $96 just to cover that $30 to be in the LCBO. So conversely, right, going to Alberta, you've got, let's say, a $30 wholesale, right? And then if you're an Alberta distillery, do you still need to sell to AJLC?
I think you just have to have your product Like you have to have a product SKU, so it has to be listed. I don't think you have to do direct through the AGLC unless you want to. So we can, as a liquor store, we can, as long as the product's listed, we can have stuff shipped directly to us from the distillery or brewery, as long as it's an Alberta
But there's
distillery or
there's
brewery.
there's fee for the SKU though, right?
Yes.
Sure. So okay. So to list the SKU, there is a fee. I don't think there's a fee in Ontario. That fee, and I think it's maybe $100 per SKU or whatever. It's a nominal one-time cost for the SKU. It's not a per bottle thing. Then you just basically go straight to the store, and the store takes a percentage. So the price is increased by anywhere from 10 to 30%.
Or higher. I know some stores are doing like a 33-35% markup.
Okay. But so sure, that's the cost. So that 30%, that $30 bottle, maybe after shipping costs, maybe ends up being $40 or $42. So that's like a really big difference. And if you're an outside distillery from Alberta, then you have to register your product with the AGLC. You have to ship it into the AGLC warehouse. So there's a shipping cost there, which can add anywhere from 50 cents a bottle to $10 a bottle based on how many bottles you're shipping, right? So that can add a lot of cost to the bottles. Like for us, if we're only shipping 200 bottles, like it can be, an extra $10 per bottle cost. And then there's agent fees as well, which can be, I think, 10 to 30%. Is that correct? And then also the store can take 10 to 30%. So at that point, things start to get a little bit closer to the $65 price point, but it still, I think, ends up being like $10 cheaper, going through all of that rigmarole, working through, going to the AGLC instead of selling in Ontario directly.
Well, just a quick side note on that. So we deal with our own version of this when it comes to BC wine and BC distilleries. I had a quick email conversation with a Vancouver distillery a while back after I'd visited them and said hello in Victoria at the Whiskey Festival there. And they had said like, oh yeah, we're in your market and we'd love to see what kind of business we could do with you guys and so on and so forth. So I looked at their pricing wholesale through Connect, and then I looked at the pricing on their website. And I do this all the time with wineries as well. This is the difficulty that Kevin's talking about, is every middleman needs to take their cut, including us as a liquor store, to make it viable in a lot of cases, or justify bringing it in and selling it. So with wines specifically and whiskeys that I've seen from BC, they're almost all of them, the wholesale price that it costs Kensington Wine Market to just purchase the bottles and bring them in to sell is often 5 to 10% more than buying it directly from the winery or distillery itself.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's tough. You either have to decide as a distillery or winery that you're going to take a loss to be in another province, or you're just happy to distribute and sell yourself in your own through your own website. And sometimes that might be the best way to go. Because for us as a liquor store specifically, the difficulty for us is we could bring it in if we really like the product and try and sell it at what's going to be like 10 to 30% more than what it is on the winery's own website. But then we look like we're price gouging, like we're gouging consumers just to get them that bottle, which I don't feel that's the case, but I can see why a consumer would. So it's the biggest difficulty beyond just general scale that we face in Canada right now. It's easy to get stuff in Alberta from other provinces in comparison to other provinces themselves, but there's still the money issue that everybody kind of has to take a cut on, and sort of drop their pricing on to make it work.
Now, what about we didn't really cover, but the interprovincial shipping of whatnot, like most of the distilleries that we all know about are already all shipping already.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I don't understand if
Canada-wide.
they're talking about like this interprovincial, like, oh, we're going to cut it. It's going to be, I mean, I don't see how any, like, what would be if they make it whatever they pass, like, how's it going to be different than it is now?
I think the biggest difference will be the consumer's general idea of what's going on, more than anything else. I don't think it's really going to affect me as working at a liquor store for what we can do as much as it will be for distilleries. Just being able to get the word out there that, yeah, we have this product and we'll ship it to you, on a larger scale than what they have it now.
That's like the consumer or just stores?
Consumer. I
But
don't
I
think
mean,
it'll
like,
affect stores. Yeah.
but everybody's already, all the big players are already shipping.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's a matter of clarity to the consumer, right? To the
Yeah.
everyday consumer. If the government is saying X, Y, and Z, even if X, Y, and Z already happens, a consumer might be more aware of it.
Yeah. Well,
And that would be the only real difference.
I mean, we already know, like,
Analogy of like me personally, I don't smoke or anything like that, but
Mhm.
a little
Good for
while ago, it became legal to have marijuana, right? Everybody was already doing it, right? Everybody was already growing it, selling it, and this, that, the other. It's just at this point, the government said, okay, now it's okay.
Yeah.
So
Now
just,
we're happy to take our cut. Yeah.
just the same with our friend with the still who's making that whiskey. Was that the first still he ever had? No, probably not. He probably had a still. He was making it. He made it until it was good, and
Yeah.
now it's no longer illegal because he's got the licensing. So these things, they are illegal until they are not illegal. And then
yeah, I guess my point is like mainly that it's just that there's, we can name off like a handful of distilleries that, are big and whatnot, but it's all those other ones that I think, like, especially with me reaching out through my Instagram and being like, hey guys, we're going to start a podcast. We want to showcase. And, most of these people or most of the brands I've posted videos, people are like, well, they've never even heard of this stuff. And to the
Yep.
whiskey people and the smaller groups that like we have and your store club stuff and our club, it's like people know who these people are, but like we make up what, like 5 to 8% of the market, and like the other
Yep.
90+% has no idea outside of what, like, especially in Ontario, like you test somebody like,
Oh yeah.
where did you get that bottle from? Like, that's not at the LCBO. Like it's crazy how LCBO it's like a big brother thing where it's like, oh no, like you mentioned something other than the LCBO, like you're,
gatekeeper thing, right?
yeah, it's
It is.
mind blowing where they're like, oh, like I could give like I could pour some single malt from some distillery in Canada, and they'd be like, holy crap, this is amazing. Like this, it's got to be, brand that we know of, and they're like, well, then you tell them it's Canadian, they're like, ah, yeah, right, whatever. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy, like just how secluded
Mhm.
Canada is, which I'm hoping that like that part of interprovincial thing will allow. Maybe they
I totally
advertise
agree.
more or something, maybe, because it's a shame that like we make so much good stuff here and nobody knows about it. Like,
Yeah.
like you were
Yeah.
saying, like we're literally like the laughing stock of the world. God,
Well,
even
but I
more
think-
so now.
But I think that's kind of what we're talking about, right? We're
Yeah.
talking about all of these barriers
Yep.
that are up that prevent us from improving, right? The interprovincial shipping, the interprovincial like getting into different stores, the registration, the interprovincial prioritization, the protectionist attitudes that exist in all the liquor boards, the fact that spirits is blamed for bunch of health concerns, and so they don't want to enable wide consumption of spirits. There's and also the fact that the distillers don't really have a Canadian distillers group or bottling group. As an independent bottler, I'd like to also be included. But
I mean, all that's in the works. Just people don't know about it.
right, but
except
it's
for
but
us
it's
reposting.
but we
posts.
don't have it now, right?
No.
We don't have somebody saying, this is false. This is a lie. I found on the Canadian government website today an article that says that the distillers were complaining about the amount of taxes charged, in all the different provinces Canada-wide, sometimes saying that it's being charged up to 80%, which I've just gone through a pricing example with you, and the result from the article was like, this is false, it's lies, that in all cases, the maximum amount of taxes charged is 20 to 28% or 20 to 30%, something like, I have it here, but I'm not going to find it now. And I looked at that and just said, that conclusion doesn't make sense, right? I went through the example here, like there's a $30 cost and you have to charge a minimum of $65. Where does that $35 go? That's not like, maybe they're just making a distinction between taxes and whatever costs, but it's like we don't have a place that's saying, no, that is false, you have done this wrong, that isn't what we care about, or etc., etc., etc. Anyway, so yeah, there's a number of problems Canada-wide that are causing distribution issues, causing consumers problems in getting the spirit.
No, it's not even that. It's even like, to go further, even like what's on the bottle. Like your bottle thing. Yeah, I mean, we could go.
Right, that I forgot about that. Yes,
Yeah, like even like I love buying 100% rye that's 100% corn. Like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I don't like, that should be physically impossible to be able to write on a bottle.
That's one of my biggest issues with Canadian whiskey rules in general. But to bring this a little bit more full circle, this is also the exciting part, or what makes me feel positive about where we are right now in Canadian whiskey, is I have this excitement to find out what is out there, because there's so much to discover.
Crazy.
That's
Crazy.
It's awesome. And I'm hoping that I'm sure I'm not the only one, and you're not the only one looking for it right now.
Yeah.
We have sort of an entire Canadian whiskey community that's kind of galvanized to look for these things, and then people that don't even know they're whiskey lovers yet that are going to be discovering some of these things. And we're kind of at the ground floor of that, which is really cool. There's a lot of things that need to be done, maybe legislation wise or removal of legislation wise, and some interprovincial trade barriers that need to come down. But there's like, from a retailer's point of view and from a whiskey lover's point of view, like there's so much that I get to talk about with this stuff.
So that's true.
What makes it exciting.
That's true. In terms of rounding out the state of Canadian whiskey, it's not all bad. We have lots of problems. There's lots of positives as well. Okanagan Spirits recently won 11 awards overseas. Wildlife Spirits has won awards. All of these other places, craft distilleries are getting noticed.
Nice.
The number of distilleries is growing. There's all sorts of positive things.
Sorry, I'm up against my hard stop here. I was told I have 5 minutes before I gotta go. So
No
right.
worries.
So okay, let's do Eau Claire whiskey Canada Corner.
Yeah, so I reached out to Eau Claire. They're super cool. They sent us a couple bottles of whiskey. We got Rupert whiskey, exceptional Canadian whiskey, 40%, and then they sent us also the Stampede Canadian rye whiskey. This is also 40%. I got Rupert's in my glass. I think we all got Rupert's, so some fort in our glass.
Yep.
Joel, what are your thoughts?
So I've been nosing this throughout the night. Initially on the first pour, I was getting almost like a movie popcorn, not the buttery movie popcorn, but the popcorn that comes fresh out of the little popcorn machine.
Mhm.
You get sort of those slightly burnt kernels, the little crispy guy down at the bottom. So I was getting that, and then as I let it sit, all of a sudden I got this buttery note. It actually reminds me of buttered pancakes, like Sunday morning pancakes. That's what I got on the nose anyways.
Man, those are
Very
great
cool.
notes.
Yeah, mine, this is possibly it's definitely an earlier batch, but I don't think the recipes really changed much. So from what I understand of the Rupert's whiskey, they are sourcing Canadian whiskey from an unknown source for this. I don't think they say what the makeup is, but there's probably some wheat or some corn in there, is my guess. And then they're blending in a little bit of their own single malt whiskey into the mix as well, which probably makes it a little bit more robust and chocolatey with even at 40%. There's some nice citrus notes that I'm getting off mine, and just a touch of dill in there as well.
Yeah, see that there's none of that on this. It's more like
Mhm.
white chocolate. Definitely some
Cool.
like it's much. I think maybe it'd be interesting to see what yours batch if you could try to find sample of the newer one to compare because
Yeah, totally.
it's very. I think it's very different. But I definitely think there is some corn or wheat or something, and possibly the newer version as well because it does
Yeah,
have like a sweet note.
the
Does
chocolate
your
and
bottle have tasting notes on the back?
I can almost yeah it does, but it's so faint it almost looks like there's I mean in the light actually the camera brings it out better than what I can
Yeah.
see. Yeah, I can barely see it looking at it, but through the camera it says brown sugar uh this is a buttery vanilla finish. Aroma is delicate sweetness, candy ginger, which I don't get any ginger. And then the style says smooth and approachable, which the word smooth
Nice.
in whiskey just is an off-putting word in my opinion.
So the only thing that's similar on what mine says is the smooth and approachable for style. Taste, it says dry red fruit, slightly nutty finish, and then aroma says delicate sweetness, nutmeg instead of ginger.
Oh, it says that it's Rupert's is a homage to the vast swaths of wilderness
Hmm.
across Canada and the United States from the place the finest barley is grown.
Yeah.
Carefully distilled and blended into the whiskey distilled celebration Alberta and the terroir of our home with the exceptional Canadian whiskey. But yeah, there's like
yeah.
literally nothing on the bottle.
Yeah.
So I do want to be just aware of the hard stop that Joel has here. Joel, do you want to give us a couple notes on the Stampede as well?
I haven't noticed this quite as much. One of the notes that I was picking up right off the bat was actually like a sour grape note, like a green sour grape. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
I like that. Yeah.
like almost very like the stems or the vines of the grape, not necessarily the fruit itself.
Mhm.
That seems to be the predominant thing that my nose is picking up.
Yeah, I get that. It's almost like a. This smells way better than the Rupert's. It's almost like a spice pear. It's like cinnamon. The stem, like which right when you open like a you like rinse out a fresh bag of grapes, like green grapes. A little bit of spice. I mean, you could definitely tell this is not.
But I think again, we should make our listeners aware that we're drinking $35 and $39
Yeah.
whiskey.
Yep.
It is 40%, but at 35 and $39, it's very, very drinkable.
Oh, for
Well,
sure.
and Stampede Rye, from what I recall, if I remember correctly too, they're sourcing whiskey for that, but then they're actually blending in some of what I was not used in this Plowman's Rye that they no longer produce. So it is some of their what's remaining of their own rye whiskey as well that goes into there, which is really neat.
Yeah, it says true to our shared agricultural roots, crafted with the same pride and passion of the farmers who devote their lives.
So I'd say head to head, I prefer the Ruperts. I did
Mhm.
find the palate on the Stampede a little bit bitterish and the
Mhm.
finish a lot shorter
Mm.
than the Ruperts.
There's a very it's like a oh, it's like a powdered. I guess
Icing
if you were to
sugar.
take like a bunch of pine needles and like dry them out and powder it, it's kind of
That
got
totally makes sense.
yeah, like a faint powdery powdered pine needle note.
Mhm.
The
Well,
nose,
that's
but you don't get that. It's weird though because you don't get it on the nose at all.
so that pine needle note, there is some of that on, or at least for me, on a lot of the Eau Claire single malts releases that they've done.
Yeah, I noticed it in the Moscatel one too. There's like a slight like
Mhm.
resinous, like green
Yeah,
vegetable,
like almost like a sappiness, pine sap note to it.
which I like Moscatel. So it kind of like it was there, but like you don't really think about it because you're like, oh, this is pretty good.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like it's fun going through. Like last week we did the Hanson, the was it the rough stock?
Rough stock, yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, again, like all these bottles in 30 to 35, $40 range. I mean, you can't really go wrong with anything. You can't complain about it. It's 35, $40. It's Canadian made. Like you want something quick. I mean, you could probably mix both of these. You could put a cube in both of them. I mean, for those people that do that.
Yeah.
I mean, can't go wrong with anything.
No, this is fundamentally lovely stuff, especially for the price.
Yeah.
Joel, if you have a hard stop, I think let's leave it there.
You probably saw people walking in the background, so
Let's say thank you very, very much. And thank you for putting up with us running over time, Joel. And thank you very much, Evan. This was truly an honor. Very cool. Lots of interesting things to talk about. And, I think we'll probably visit these subjects again in future podcasts. And, who knows, maybe we'll have you on again in some future episode.
I'd love to be on again and hopefully
I
not
got more
pull you
questions.
guys along for 2 weeks before we actually make a date.
that was my
That was my fault on the last one. I double booked myself and then I ended up getting to neither tasting or podcast. So,
Oh no.
but thank you guys so much for having me. This is my first podcast I've ever done. So it's been tons of fun.
I mean, it's not like we've done a lot of them. So.
you can tell.
I can clear our fifth one, so come on.
Yeah, that's
I'm still editing the last one.
Yeah.
I mean, when we stop, I do have one question for you, though. I just have one.
Sure.
Kevin, if you want to stop, you can stop it.
Great. Thanks very much, guys.